Do you know or have experienced NARC-SPLAINING? Let's find out here. Let's talk about something most of us have dealt with at some point: the unnecessary explainers. Now, yes, mansplaining is the popular term, but let's be real, anyone can fall into this trap. So, to keep it inclusive, let's just call it explaining. What do I mean by explaining? I'm talking about when someone starts offering advice, information, or guidance you didn't ask for, often in a tone that's patronizing, excessive, or just flat out wrong. And the kicker? It usually comes from someone who has no business giving that advice in the first place. Like that time someone tried to give me super intense, holier-than-thou financial advice, only to find out they had like $19 in their bank account. Thanks, but I'm good. Or take your uncle, you know, the one who hasn't worked in your field for decades and wasn't even great at it to begin with, but now he's suddenly an expert on what you should be doing. Never mind the fact that your industry has completely transformed since the last time he clocked in. Or how about when someone who once vacationed in a city tries to tell you, someone who just moved there, how to live like a local? Oh, the best coffee shop is this one, they'll say, as if Yelp isn't free. Explaining can also look like an accountant telling a preschool teacher how to run their classroom, or someone with no kids giving you a detailed lecture on parenting, as if they just got back from a masterclass on child development. Spoiler, they didn't. But here's the heart of it. Explaining shuts down connection. These are not conversations. They are monologues disguised as help. The explainer isn't listening. They are not engaging. It's all about them proving something, not about you feeling heard. Contrast that with a real, reciprocal conversation. You say, I started a new job, loving it, but the hours are rough. And a genuine person replies, that sounds intense, but I'm glad you like the work. What's the role like? What are you hoping to get out of it? See the difference? They are present, curious. There's a give and take. Then maybe you say, and how's your work going these days? That's how connection happens. Now picture the same scenario, but with an explainer. You say, I like my new job, but the hours are long. And here they come. Oh yeah, in roles like that you have to be tracking your hours. You're using the XYZ software, right? No? That company is behind the times. You need to talk to HR about switching systems because trust me, that's the only way to track productivity these days. I read a thing about it, and suddenly you're just gone. Checked out. Because you didn't ask for a TED Talk. You wanted a conversation. So the next time someone starts explaining, take a breath and remember, it's not about you. It's about their need to feel right, needed, or superior. And maybe, just maybe, we can all try to catch ourselves before we turn a moment of connection into a monologue no one asked for. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You're not being heard. They're not actually engaging with you. They're just launching into their monologue, their own personal blah blah blah. And it's not always out of nowhere. Sometimes, you're asking a straightforward question or making a simple request. Like, hey, can you grab some bananas and a loaf of bread while you're out? But instead of sure, you get a full-blown lecture. Well, white bread is basically poison, you know. And you really shouldn't shop at that store. Their bread's trash. You always get that multigrain from XYZ. But let me tell you, that stuff's not even real multigrain. You should really start buying from this local bakery on Main. But only before 3 p.m. on weekdays, because otherwise. And you're standing there thinking, just get the bread. Now, the most frustrating kind of explaining. That's when someone starts going off about a topic you're actually an expert in. Maybe it's your profession, or something you've spent years studying, and suddenly someone with no real background is holding court, telling you how it all works. I remember this one dinner party. A guy, who was apparently chasing podcast trends, decided narcissism was his new favorite subject. He had no background in mental health. None. But there he was, confidently educating the whole table about it. Everyone at the table knew what I did for a living. And yet, halfway through his speech, he turned to me and said something like, "Did you know that?" And then proceeded to tell me something incredibly basic about narcissism, as if he had just discovered fire. And then he kept going. I smiled, nodded, got up and helped myself to way too much dessert, because that was the most polite exit strategy one could come up with. Mentally, I just filed it away like, well, guess I'm making a video about this. Now, in this guy's case, there was a clear narcissistic edge. He needed to be the expert, the center of attention. And what stood out most wasn't just what he was saying, it was how he said it. Like he was the first person to ever figure this stuff out. Like everyone should be grateful for his enlightenment. So what does any of this have to do with narcissism? A lot, actually. Because while anyone can fall into the trap of over-explaining, sometimes due to culture, anxiety, or lack of self-awareness, when narcissism is involved, it looks very different. With narcissistic personalities, explaining becomes part of a pattern, or entitlement to be the expert, arrogance disguised as helpfulness, a complete lack of interest in your perspective, needing validation, not dialogue, talking at you, not with you. And here's the difference. When the explainer isn't narcissistic, you can often gently point it out and they'll adjust. They might laugh at themselves or say, "Oh, sorry, I got carried away." They are capable of self-reflection. But with narcissists, you try to interrupt, redirect, or even just disagree politely. You're likely to get met with defensiveness, condescension, or outright rage. Because to them, it's not a conversation, it's a performance, and you're just the audience. And when narcissism meets privilege, gender, class, culture, whatever, it's like pouring gasoline on the fire. The explaining becomes relentless, and calling it out, not an option without consequences. So yeah, explaining may seem harmless, even annoying at times. But in narcissistic dynamics, it's not just frustrating, it's silencing. It's one more way they keep the spotlight on themselves while tuning everyone else out. You know the type, the person who just won't stop talking. One of the strangest things about narcissistic individuals is their paradoxical ability to both read a room and completely miss it at the same time. On some level, they are aware they are losing people, but their need to be heard, to be right, to be seen as superior, that overrides everything else. And if we're talking about vulnerable narcissists, the story gets even messier. These are the ones who carry deep insecurities beneath the surface. There's often an element of social anxiety at play. They are afraid of being judged, dismissed, or exposed. But instead of managing that discomfort with humility, they go the other way. They talk, and talk, and talk. See, deep down, the vulnerable narcissist often believes that everyone around them is less intelligent, less informed, or just generally beneath them. So of course they start explaining. To them, it's not condescending, it's necessary. Because in their eyes, you clearly need their wisdom. Unlike grandiose narcissists, who tend to come equipped with charm, polish, and some social finesse, vulnerable narcissists lack that glossy layer. So their version of attention-seeking is more raw. They dominate conversations, often without realizing how awkward it gets. And here's when that explaining behavior really ramps up. When they feel insecure, exposed, or slightly threatened. Maybe someone in the room just shared a success or is being praised. Maybe someone said something that unintentionally reminds them of their own shortcomings. That's the trigger, and suddenly, the monologue begins. You'll notice the speech becomes pressured, fast, intense, hard to interrupt. It's like they are on a mission to prove something before anyone else gets a word in. The rest of the group just sits there, nodding politely, quietly zoning out. Or, if they are lucky, making a break for the dessert table. And often, it's not just the length of what they say, it's the tone. Their explanations can be painfully pedantic, overly detailed, needlessly nitpicky, and weirdly condescending. You might say, "Oh, I stayed at the XYZ hotel in LA," and they'll jump in with, "Actually, that's in Pasadena, and it's not even called XYZ anymore. It's ABC now, and honestly, it's gone downhill since the new ownership." It's not helpful, it's uncomfortable, and it often carries this smug, "I know better than you" energy that can feel dismissive or even mocking. You get the sense they're not just correcting you, they're putting you in your place. Now, compare that to the grandiose narcissist. Their style of overtalking tends to lean more toward performance. They are holding court, telling exaggerated stories, commanding attention. but they're not necessarily explaining something. They're just putting on a show. Explaining, by contrast, is often about trying to teach something. How things work, what's correct, or what they think is the proper way of doing things. And don't forget the self-righteous subtype of narcissist. These are the moralizers, the lifestyle police. They'll go on endlessly about their clean way of living, how they only eat vegetables from their own organic garden, fertilized by their pet goat's manure, or how their kids were raised without screen time, sugar, or nonsense. It's not conversation, it's doctrine. And the unspoken message is clear. You're doing it wrong. Let me explain how to be more like me. It's often the vulnerable narcissists who rely most heavily on the explaining behavior. For them, it serves a dual purpose. It's both a defense mechanism and a subtle form of control. When their insecurity flares up, they lean on splaining to protect themselves and reassert dominance. But make no mistake, it's exhausting. For the listener, it's a one-way street that drains every ounce of patience and energy. Not long ago, I had 2 back-to-back conversations in the same day, and the contrast was wild. The first was with someone warm, curious, and open-minded. We went back and forth, listened to each other, learned from each other. We both brought our experiences into the conversation and respected each other's insights. Honestly, I didn't want it to end. It felt good. Later that day, conversation number 2. Same topic, but a completely different experience. This time, I was stuck with someone in full-on splain mode. There was no dialogue, just a verbal monologue with 0 openings. I found myself mentally checking out, wishing I could just pull out my phone and play solitaire while they went on and on. I actually started doing breathing exercises just to stay grounded. That's how bad it was. Tried to interrupt once or twice. No luck. The speech was so rapid and dense that squeezing in a comment was like trying to jump onto a moving train. Eventually, I resorted to throwing out a few neutral comments about the weather and waited for it to end. When it was over, I felt drained. Not angry, just flat. Whereas that first conversation had left me energized and uplifted, this one left me irritated and tired. Here's the kicker. The explainer in this situation is someone I know pretty well. They are not evil, not outwardly cruel. In fact, they can be nice. But when they feel even slightly threatened or insecure, boom, we're off to the splain races. So, I got clever. I downloaded Solitaire to my iPad. Now, whenever they call me and launch into their lecture, at least I've got something to keep me occupied. Unfortunately, that doesn't help during in-person conversations. For those, it's back to breathing techniques and grounding strategies. And no, you can't talk to a narcissistic explainer about this. You can't pull them aside and say, "Hey, could you maybe not explain everything to me?" Because the backlash will be instant. You're jealous. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just rude. You're the narcissist, not me. Before you know it, you're the one being attacked. You're insulted, blamed, invalidated, and the explaining doesn't stop. It never stops. So what's the answer? Radical acceptance. Seriously, they're not going to stop explaining. Not for you, not for anyone. So you learn to survive it. The Mona Lisa smile, the polite head nod, the occasional "oh wow" or interesting. And just as importantly, make sure you have healthy, grounded people in your life. The kind who listen, who engage, who know how to share space in a conversation. You'll need them. They'll be your emotional counterbalance. Because sometimes, when you're dealing with narcissistic personalities, it's not the gaslighting or manipulation that wears you down. It's the boredom. It's the sheer monotony of having to sit through yet another one-sided lecture with someone who won't shut up about things they barely understand. Being in a narcissistic relationship can feel like being trapped in a room with the world's most boring podcast, one you never subscribed to, with a host who never asked if you wanted to listen. So if you've been there, I see you. You're not alone. And yes, solitaire counts as self-care.